It was Labor Day weekend, and I was standing in my Uncle Rick's backyard with a paper plate of potato salad I didn't want. My dad was 3 feet away telling the story again, the one about how I tried to start my own marketing business 2 years ago, and it folded in 8 months. He was so sure about himself, my dad said to my cousin, his laugh sharp enough to cut. Spent 40 grand on equipment. 40 grand. He shook his head like he was talking about someone who'd fallen for a scheme. I told him it wasn't going to work. I watched him take a sip of his beer. He didn't look angry. He looked satisfied. Like the story was proof of something he'd always known. That's the moment everything started making sense. Not because of what he said I'd heard worse, but because of who was standing next to him, quiet, listening. My brother Michael. 28 years old. No college degree. No job that I knew of. Just there. And the way my dad's arm rested on his shoulder told me something had been happening in the year since we'd all last been together. I didn't know yet about the house. I didn't know about the $2.5 million. I only knew that I was suddenly, clearly, not the son he wanted to celebrate. This wasn't new. The pattern had started when I was maybe 12. My dad had a way of treating uncertainty like a moral failing. When I was interested in art, he'd made jokes about starving artists. When I wanted to try debate club, he asked why I'd want to stand up and talk for no money. The subtext was always the same. Don't get your hopes up. Don't be naive. The world isn't kind to dreamers. Michael, on the other hand, had always been the backup plan. Smart enough. Handsome enough. Stable enough. He didn't push boundaries or ask for more. He worked at a car dealership. He lived 5 minutes from my parents. He came over for dinner every Sunday and didn't complain about anything. My mom used to say, "Your dad just shows love differently," which was her way of saying he didn't show it at all in ways I could recognize. When I'd graduated with my degree in marketing, he'd shown up to the ceremony. He sat in the bleachers. He didn't come to the reception. He sent a check for $500 with a note that said, "Congratulations on finishing." That word, finishing, like it was a prison sentence completed. The business attempt happened right after that. I was 25, hungry to prove something, hungry to make him see me. I rented office space. I built a website. I did everything by the book. And when it didn't work, when the clients didn't come, when I was burning through savings at $3 grand a month with nothing to show for it, I closed it down. I got a job at an agency. I moved forward. My dad never let it die. He brought it up at Easter. He mentioned it when my boss got promoted. He referenced it when someone in our family went through something difficult, as if to say, look, failure doesn't stop, which I think was his way of saying don't trust yourself. Michael listened to these stories and never said anything. He'd just exist in the background, solid and uncomplicated, and I realized somewhere around age 28 that I was being compared to my brother constantly, and not in a way that would ever let me win. 6 weeks before that Labor Day reunion, my mom called me. Not a video call. An actual phone call. She sounded different, less relaxed, like she'd been practicing the words before dialing. "Your dad and Grandpa had a conversation," she said. "About the house." The house was my grandfather's estate. He'd owned it outright since 1982. It was in one of those neighborhoods where the houses had gotten exponentially more valuable just by existing. Last appraisal was $2.47 million. Grandpa was 89. He'd been mentioning his will more often, not in a morbid way, just in a practical one. You could tell he was thinking about legacy. "What about the house?" I asked. My mom was quiet for a moment. "Your father asked your grandfather to leave it to Michael. Said something about wanting to set him up. Wanting to give him security." I didn't understand why she was telling me. I didn't understand yet that she was warning me. Why would Grandpa listen to that? I asked. "It's Grandpa's house. Grandpa's money. Your grandfather didn't say anything at first," she said. "But then he called me yesterday. Asked how you were doing. Asked what you wanted to do with your life." The specificity of that question bothered me. It felt like someone was looking at me for the first time in years and I was being measured against something. Did he tell you what he decided? I asked. No. But he said he needed to think about what leaving money means. What it does to people. I hung up that phone and sat with it for 2 hours. Not angry yet. Just processing. A $2 million house isn't just money. It's the rest of someone's life restructured. It's not having to struggle. It's security that erases half your fears. My dad was trying to give that to Michael, not because Michael needed it, but because my dad had apparently decided Michael deserved it. The question underneath was clear. What did I deserve? The reunion was at Uncle Rick's place, a 4-bedroom in the suburbs with a pool that someone was always adjusting the chemicals in. It was hot. One of those September days that felt like summer was refusing to leave. I didn't decide to confront my father. I didn't plan it. I was helping Grandpa get a plate of food, and I'd asked him how he was feeling and he said, "Your mother told you about our conversation?" I said yes. He handed me his plate and said, "Walk with me." We went to the back corner of the yard, away from the noise. He sat down on one of those plastic lounge chairs that makes a sound like it's surprised to be supporting weight. I stood. "I want to tell you what your father said," Grandpa began. "And I want you to know I didn't make my decision based on it." Then he told me everything. How my dad had framed it, not greedily, but with this logic that Michael needed stability, that Michael was the reliable one, that my father wanted to set him up. How it had struck him as odd that he was being asked to do something so significant, something so final, without me even being mentioned. "I think he's been angry at you for a long time," Grandpa said. "And he doesn't know how to be proud of you, so he decided he wouldn't be." I felt something crack open in my chest. Not sadness, something sharper. Clarity. Finally, someone had named the thing that had lived in our house for decades. "I want you to know I'm not leaving you anything," Grandpa said then, and my heart actually dropped. "I'm not leaving either of you anything." I thought I'd misunderstood. "I'm setting up a foundation," he continued, "for small business grants. For people under 35 who are trying to build something and need capital. The business idea gets reviewed. If it's viable, they get up to $50,000, no strings attached." He paused. "Your father interpreted me asking you how you were doing as me asking how your life was going. I was actually asking how you were healing from that business attempt. I was thinking about how many people have good ideas that fail for reasons that have nothing to do with merit. And I was thinking about how that looked when your father kept throwing it at you, like it was a character defect." I sat down on the edge of a concrete planter. "The money from the house sale, most of it goes to funding that. I told your father this yesterday, and he got very quiet. I understood then why Grandpa had come to the reunion, why he was sitting at the edge of the party watching. That evening my dad was in the kitchen getting another beer. I followed him in. The house was the kind with an open concept so everyone could still hear, but the kitchen felt separate, a little contained space. "I heard you talk to Grandpa about the house," I said. He didn't turn around. "I heard you asked him to leave it to Michael." He opened the fridge. The light made his face look older, tired. "And I want you to know that I know why. I know you don't believe in me. I know the business failure convinced you I'm not capable of building something that matters. And I want you to know that I'm not asking you to change your mind about that." He turned to look at me. "But I'm also not going to pretend anymore that this is about my potential or my capabilities. This is about you. About what you're comfortable with. And that's not my problem to fix." His jaw tightened. "Grandpa's not leaving either of us the house," I continued. "He's turning it into a foundation. For people starting businesses. For people whose ideas are good but their circumstances aren't. Which is a pretty elegant way of saying he thinks what happened to me matters. And he thinks it shouldn't define me." My dad said, "That's a waste." I felt the old hurt try to attach itself and I let it pass. "Maybe," I said. "But it's his money. And it's his choice." I walked back outside. What you expect after something like that is usually resolution. Softening. An apology. A moment where everyone understands each other better. What actually happened was quieter. My dad and I didn't speak for 3 months. He didn't call. I didn't call. My mom would update me on things, his birthday dinner, a medical appointment, nothing personal. Just the facts of his life continuing. Michael called me, which surprised me. He was upset. Dad's barely talking to me, he said. I don't understand what happened. I explained it to him. I didn't ask for the house, Michael said. He sounded genuinely hurt. I would never have asked for that. I know, I said. And I meant it. He makes his own decisions about his kids, Michael continued. And apparently I'm the one he decided was worth investing in. The frustration in his voice was real. And for the first time I saw that Michael had never asked for this dynamic either. He was just a person who'd been told he was the better son, and he'd had to live with that knowledge while watching our father treat me like a disappointment. We had coffee a few weeks later. He told me he was getting his MBA. He told me he'd actually left the car dealership months ago and was doing financial consulting. He told me he felt like he lived in my dad's fantasy of who he was and he was tired. Grandpa asked me to be on the board for the foundation, Michael said, to help review business proposals. He said he wanted people involved who knew what it felt like to disappoint Dad. I laughed. Actually laughed. My father showed up at Thanksgiving. He brought a pie my mom had made. He sat at the table and participated in conversation, but he didn't look at me directly. We were in a new kind of silence, not estrangement but distance. 6 months after the reunion, Grandpa's foundation gave out its first round of grants. 13 people. 13 ideas that had potential and people who just needed a shot. It made the local news. Small headline. Business section. My dad read it. I know because my mom mentioned it in a way that was meant to tell me that he'd seen it, that he'd witnessed Grandpa's vision becoming real, that his attempt to shape the inheritance had backfired into something bigger than any individual son. I don't think he understood that Grandpa wasn't punishing him. He was trying to teach him something about what legacy means. A year after all of this, I was at a coffee shop doing work, and a woman came up to me. "Are you the guy from the foundation article?" she asked. I said no, confused. I thought so. I got one of the grants, $50,000 from my fashion brand. The money literally kept me from closing down. She told me her story, how she'd been funding it herself, how every dollar was stretched, how her family didn't understand the vision, how she was a month away from giving up when the foundation reviewed her application. "I heard your grandpa came up with it because someone in your family understood what it's like to take a risk and have people judge you for it," she said. "I just wanted to thank you. Or him. Or whoever." She left before I could explain that I wasn't actually part of the foundation's operation. But as I sat there, I realized something had shifted in how the story mattered. My father's shame about my failure had become a foundation that funded other people's dreams. His inability to believe in me had accidentally created infrastructure for belief. And all of that had started because my grandfather had asked the right question at the right time. I haven't fixed my relationship with my dad. That's important to say. I don't know if we ever will. He still doesn't quite know how to be proud of me, and I've had to make peace with the fact that his approval might not come. But I've also stopped waiting for it to be the thing that determines whether I believe in myself. My brother and I text sometimes. He's coming into his own, not in the shadow of my father's expectations, but outside of them. He told me recently that hearing me stand up to my dad that day had given him permission to do the same. To say no to being the favorite. To actually be himself instead of the version of himself that my father had decided to celebrate. The thing about inherited pain is that it sometimes looks like truth. It feels like clarity. Like someone's finally telling you the real story about who you are. My father believed he was warning me, teaching me, setting me up for disappointment so that I wouldn't be disappointed later. What he actually did was teach me that protection and rejection feel almost identical when they come from someone you needed to believe in you. If you've ever had someone close to you treat your ambition like a flaw, you know that feeling. You know how it becomes easier to doubt yourself than to doubt them. How you start collecting evidence that they were right all along. But here's what I know now. They're not always right. Sometimes the people closest to us are just afraid. Sometimes their inability to see our potential says nothing about our potential and everything about their fear. I don't know what my dad was so scared of. I've stopped trying to figure it out. What matters is that I stopped waiting for his version of me to become true, and I started paying attention to the version I was actually building. That's where the real story begins.